Hey everyone, Genesis Keyboard Covers here, and I'm finally doing that video I promised over half a year ago by now of my keyboard rig. And in this video, I'll obviously go over my rig and how I used it on my covers for the past year, and that video where I played through the entirety of The Way We Walk. I'll also explain the physical, so the hardware side of my setup, and the digital virtual stuff that's going on the computer and all of the fun stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And I'll try my best to explain them coherently. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. I'll start off with the Wavestation up here up top. And I'll start with this because I think it's a very integral part of the setup. This is the one I use to change all my sounds when I play the set, and Tony used this one a lot. There's a lot of sounds off of this keyboard on the tour and on the album. Jesus He Knows Me, Fading Lights, Living Forever, to name a few. And I'm running this stereo like all the other keyboards in my setup, and I've also got MIDI in and out running through it. Also something that's common with all my keyboards in the rig. On the back I've also got an expression pedal connected and a sustain pedal for changing the sounds. And right under the Wavestation here I've got an Ensoniq VFX, and Tony, he went through all of the VFX family synths over the time of recording the album and to finishing the tour. He started out with the base model, which I have here, the basic VFX, and then in the rehearsals for the tour, he can be seen with the VFX SD model, which added a floppy drive and a sequencer, though I really only think he got it to get rid of all the bugs that the VFX is known for having. And then later on, during the tour, maybe sometime halfway through it, he upgraded to the SD1, which added piano sounds. I think it was piano sounds, and those aren't really used on the tour. I think that was also a case of just getting a new version to get rid of all the bugs in the OS. And in my VFX here, on the RAM banks, I've got the VPC 103 cartridge loaded up. I don't have the physical cartridge, but I managed to find some MIDI system exclusive that included it, and I've uploaded that into the RAM. And this cartridge has a lot of the sounds that were used on both the album and the tour, and I don't think there's a single factory ROM preset sound on this tour from the VFX. And here, in place of where Tony would have had his Roland JD800, I've got my Novation Impulse. It's a basic 61 key MIDI controller that I also use as kind of a MIDI interface for the Mark 80 below it. And on the back of it, I've got the Mark 80 MIDI in and out running into the corresponding ports of the Novation, which kind of functions as a sort of MIDI interface of sorts. And I've also got an expression pedal, so I can control whatever MIDI it is that I need to control on the PC on plugins. And since there's not much to say about just the MIDI keyboard, the Mark 80 right below it, oddly enough, Rhodes, but it's manufactured by Roland, and it's mostly here for the pianos and obviously the Rhodes sounds heard on I Can't Dance, for example. And it also acts as kind of a main MIDI keyboard of sorts, so anytime Tony had the freedom to choose, for example, tonight, he could play that on any keyboard here, he would play it on the Mark 80. And right underneath the Rhodes, next to its pedals, I've got my mixer. It's a Behringer Xenix 1002 FX, to be precise. And this then gets all of the audio from my keyboards and sends that out to my audio interface. And over here on the PC, I'm running Ableton, where I record all of this stuff into, and I've also got all the samples and plugins running here. In addition to that, I have MIDI OX, which is in charge of doing all the patch changes. And finally, Loop MIDI, which I can use to create a sort of virtual MIDI cable that can route the MIDI from MIDI OX into Ableton. And this is the part where I think it might get a bit confusing to follow. I'll try to explain how I do the sound changes with the pedal. And I think first off I should explain how Tony would have done it. For this stuff, he would have used a rack unit called the Miditemp PMM88, and that was kind of a programmable patch bay of sorts. It's got 8 MIDI inputs and 8 MIDI outputs, and you can see the small grey controller for the PMM88 on the concert films. It's jammed between the JD800 and the Rhodes. So you could use this to program all sorts of program changes and MIDI routings into sort of presets or banks. And this patch bay would also allow you to use a pedal to advance those presets, which is how Tony did it in concert. I, however, don't have the PMM88. Instead, I've used my Wavestation, which has the neat ability to assign foot pedals to different functions like general volume for expression pedals and to advance through presets with a sustain-like pedal. So when I press the pedal, it takes me from, say, preset 1 to preset 2. And of course, when you press the pedal and change the preset, that then makes the keyboard send a program change message. And what I did next is I run that program change message into MIDI OX, where it gets handled by what's called a translation map. And the translation map takes one incoming MIDI message and lets you customize it to output as any other MIDI message you like MIDI CC, program changes, anything like that. It's also able to copy the signal and assign multiple outputs for a single input message. And I've made this picture here to kind of try to make it a bit easier to understand what's going on. So the program change message comes in from the Wavestation into MIDI aux, into the translation map, where it's translated into multiple messages, which are then routed to the different instruments and my DAW. And for the songs that call for sending MIDI from one keyboard to another, I've opted not to do that, since it would bring another level of complexity to the already confusing routing. So anytime a song calls for, say, example, a Wavestation sound on the Mark 80, like on Tonight, 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 you'd hear that string pad underneath the marimba. I've just opted to sample that sound into my DAW and play it through MIDI. And now onto the songs and sounds of the set. The set starts off with Land of Confusion, which is program number 0 on the Wavestation. The Wavestation itself isn't used on the track, but it's just there as a base preset so that I can just press 0 and go to the beginning, so that it sets up all the keyboards ready for the rest of the set. And on Land of Confusion, the Novation is split into 2 parts. The lower half is the percussive stab sound, which I think was... I can't remember how I made this. I think it was a sample from some Roland sampler, I think. And I think there was some DX700 as well. I was originally trying to find the exact instrument that made this sound, but I had no luck, so I had to just try and recreate it with what I had. And the other sound on the Novation is the bell pad kind of thing in the bridge. This was a sample of a Prophet 10 and a DX7, and it sounds like this. And all of this you see here, these are the separate samples of the sound. And I've opted to use samples instead of plugins because having a million plugins open would make this Ableton session quite unstable and would make my computer not so happy. So using the samples, it kind of eases the load on my CPU. But then moving on to the Rhodes, the physical unit itself is switched to a custom preset, which is basically just a mute switch. I've just made a preset and made it completely silent so that I can play MIDI parts on it without having to fiddle with the volume slider. And the MIDI sound itself is the classic emulator 2 vocal, the very iconic 80s kind of vocal pad sound. And that's about it for Land of Confusion. Moving on to No Side of Mine, I think it's best to start out with the most iconic part of the whole song, which is that guitar sample. And I got mine from the interviews of the 1992 DVD where Tony plays this sound in isolation when he's demoing his set, and it sounds like this. Underneath that, the Novation plays a sample of a Wavestation preset called Ooze, and that preset is from the WPC12 expansion card for the Wavestation, and it sounds like this. In addition to that, the Novation also has another sound on it that gets faded in during the build-up for the chorus, and it's this basic sawtooth pad, and I've got no idea what it could have been originally, but I've used a simple subtractive synthesizer here called Odin 2 for the sound, and this is what it looks like on there. And the sound fades in during the build-up here, and this is what it sounds like. So we get to the chorus, fade in the pad, and switch to the next part. This mutes the ooze sound, leaving only the pad on the Novation, and switches the Mark 80 to play a sample of another Wavestation preset that's called Reso Pad 1, and this sound is also on that same card that the ooze preset is on, and I think the switch happens around here. I'll try and find it. We've switched to just the pad here, and the Rhodes enters about now. So that continues through the chorus, and after going through that, we get to the next pedal press, which brings back the ooze. And when we're getting ready to enter back into the verse, I get ready on the expression pedal, because I have to very quickly mute that pad sound, that sawtooth pad sound with it. All of this repeats for the next chorus and for the last one, but in addition to this, the last chorus switches the Rhodes to play an internal sound I've programmed, and it's based on the classic Rhodes preset, and it sounds like this. And that is the last sound for No Side of Mine. Next up is Driving the Last Spike, which starts off on the Rhodes, and it's split between two samples. There's a Wavestation vocal sound, which is based on the Airvox patch, and the Roland JD800 Hearts of Space preset. And they sound like this. And after that intro, we move to the VFX, which plays a preset called Very Breath from the VPC 103 cartridge. And it sounds like this. And then a bit later, the Wavestation enters in with that same Airvox preset for the melody. And then, right after the first chorus, after the big chords on the VFX, the Wavestation switches to this organ sound. And this sound is most likely originally from the Kurzweil 1000PX, I've heard. The Voce DMI-64 Mark II is also a candidate, or maybe even a combination of the two, but I haven't found any samples or virtual recreations of either of them, so what I did is I used the Wavestation Organ 2 Wave, and that is very similar to the Kurzweil organ. And I've used this for all the parts where it would appear. And it sounds like this. And after the organ plays through the rest of the chorus, we get back on the Airvox preset on the Wavestation for the melody. And after that, the whole verse-chorus thing repeats, after which we get to this second part of the song, where the Rhodes switches to another internal sound, and this time it's the piano 1.1 preset, which I had to manually engage the chorus on because it couldn't be saved with the chorus. This would have been layered with piano from that same Kurzweil, but again, no samples. And it sounds like this. And on the same pedal press, the Wavestation switches to this brighter version of the Airvox preset, to which I've added a percussive attack to, and that uses the Wavestation sound called Pluck 2, and it sounds like this. And this continues on until we get back to the organ sound, which ends the song. Moving on to the old medley. Starting off, the Rhodes plays this synthy sawtooth pad for the intro of Dance on a Volcano. For this sound, I also use the Odin 2 plugin, and on there, this patch looks like this. And the VFX starts off with this organ sound, which I think would have been the Voce DMI-64 Mark II, but again, another obscure rack unit that has no virtual recreation. So I opted to use the Hanon B70 plugin, which is just a B3 emulation, basically. I used a ton of EQ to try and dial in the sound, and the drawbar settings I used for this sound are 7, 7, 8, 6, 3, 2, 4, 0, 0. And it sounds like this. And the Novation plays this lead sound that I made with the JD800 plugin. It uses a single waveform called Syn Pulse 3 with an almost fully open filter, and it sounds like this. And For the next part, the Wavestation is using this patch that's just called Choir. I'm not entirely sure if this is the actual sound, but I think this matches it pretty well. Again, heavily chorused. And all of that repeats for the duration of Dance on a Volcano. And on the next pedal press, we get to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And the only thing that this changes is that the Rhodes MIDI sound is muted, and it switches to the piano 1.1 sound for the Lamb. And once the Lamb fades out, we get to the musical box, and that uses the same organ from Dance on a Volcano. And in the middle of it, there's this very unnoticeable change in the sound. It's very subtle, but you can see Tony press the pedal, and this comes in on that small pause after Phil sings, "It doesn't seem to matter now, not now." And the drawbars change a little bit. And the new setting is 7, 7, 8, 6, 3, 3, 4, 4, 3. And it makes the sound slightly brighter. And at the end of musical box, the organ fades out, and the next press, the Novation switches to the fourth or fifth lead. And I tried recreating it on the Odin 2 VST synth, again, just because it's much easier to program than the slightly cumbersome JD800, and on here, it looks like this. In addition to all of the filters on the plugin, I've used a little more filtering outside in Ableton and a bit of EQ, and it sounds like this. And then when we get to the guitar solo, the Wavestation plays a blend of that same Voce organ and the legato strings preset from the Emu Proteus 2. And just the strings in isolation. That then finishes off for the fifth, and we get to I Know What I Like, which starts out with that lawnmower kind of effect. And that is a modified 1974 preset from the JD800. The preset's actually called 1974, and it sounds like this. And right after that, the Wavestation switches again to that same organ sound heard earlier in the set on Driving the Last Spike. And the next change switches out the lawnmower sound to a simple 3 oscillator sawtooth lead. Again, probably originally from the JD800, but I used the Odin 2 plugin once again. And then after Phil's tambourine dance, the Novation switches to an EQ'd Home by the Sea lead sound for the You Can Tell Me By The Way I Walk section. I'm not sure of the actual origin of this sound. It's most likely from the JD800, but I didn't want to spend too much time on researching this sound when I already had something that sounds very similar. And then after that part, we get right back to the same 3 oscillator sawtooth lead, which ends the song. So, Fading Light. Fading Light starts off with the Wavestation on the Warm Strings preset, and the Warm Strings preset sounds like this. That plays through the entirety of the first half of the song, up until the solo, where it fades out, and we get on the VFX with this sound, which is the brass stab preset on the VPC 103. And during all of that, the Wavestation is switched to the mini lead preset for the solo. And the next pedal press, right after the second time the brass comes in, gets us to this organ pad that's played on the VFX. And it's through MIDI. And this might have been the Voce, might have been a sample of something. I don't know the origin, so I just tried programming something that kind of matches it. And I used the Prophet 10 organ as a bass for this sound, and it sounds like this. It sounds quite bad in isolation, but in the song it's fine. And after that, the VFX changes to a preset I actually programmed. I don't know if it was an actual preset or something Tony also programmed, but it's this very airy choir pad, and it sounds like this. And then after that part finishes, we get back to the brass stab. And then the Wavestation finishes the song off with a preset called Octave Strings. So, that sound on the VFX with Jesus He Knows Me, it's a patch called Florida Key on the VPC 103 cartridge, and we all know what it sounds like. And for that vibrato at the end of the notes, I'm using the aftertouch of the VFX. And the Wavestation uses a custom preset based on the synth string patch, and it sounds like this. The patch is transposed up one whole octave, which gets you that kind of sound. And in the choruses, there's this percussive stab layered with the pad, and it's based on a clavinet patch from the Wavestation. It uses 2 Prophet VS waveforms, and it sounds like this. And then there's one additional sound in the bridge here on the Wavestation that's basically just a pipe organ. That's all I can say about it. And that's all the sounds for Jesus He Knows Me. Next up, Dreaming While You Sleep. And this song is mainly played on the VFX on a preset called New French, also on the VPC 103 cartridge. The bass preset is much mellower in timbre and opens the filter with the modulation wheel. And I've edited mine to be brighter by default, and this is how I imagine Tony would have also done it, so that he wouldn't have to play around with the modulation wheel for the right sound. And it sounds like this. The one other sound for the song is on the Wavestation, again, the warm strings preset, which has this additional brighter sample that is faded in with the expression pedal during the chorus. And the fade starts coming in. And you get this massive string pad. Next up is Home by the Sea, and this song mainly just uses samples from the Synclavier 2 synthesizer, and all the samples are ran through chorus. And all these sounds Tony used on Home by the Sea can be found on the internet in a format that the Arturia Synclavier V plugin can read. So if you're interested in the sounds, you can find those with a bit of Googling. And these sounds are mapped all around the Mark 80 and Novation on all the different pedal presses. And I'll play through all of the sounds now. So it starts off with this low brass sound in the intro. Later on, moves on to the Rhodes Mark 80 with this kind of sound. A plucky kind of, I don't know what you would compare this sound to. Then, again, in the basic verses, we get this bell sound. And then this French horn sound on the Novation, and it sounds like this. Then we get to the build up to the chorus. There's this kind of ghostly voice sound that is used for the melody in that part. Then we finally get to the solo, which starts off on that very recognizable lead sound. And that continues on for the solo. In the middle of it, the Wavestation plays this wheel vox sound again for the left-hand melody. And after that part on the Wavestation, there's this bell sound that is played on the Mark 80 again. After which we get right back to the lead sound, lead solo sound, and after that small guitar interlude in the middle here, the solo sound actually switches onto the Mark 80, and this time it has portamento on it, so it would sound like this. And right after that, there's another sound which creates this very chaotic background, this kind of effect that pitches down over time. And that continues on in the background for the whole guitar solo section. And right after that, we get right back into the same set that was heard earlier in the song. And throughout the whole song, the VFX is playing this kind of string pad. This is also a custom preset, which I think would have also originally been on the VFX. I'm not sure what this preset would have been called, but it very much sounds like the VFX. Hold On My Heart, another a bit more simple one, I guess. On the Wavestation, we're set on the Whisper Voices preset, which sounds like this. On top of that, the VFX is playing this JD800 Hearts of Space preset through MIDI. And then during the verses, there's this bell sound that accompanies the Wavestation pad, and it's a sample of an Ensoniq VFX preset called EL Piano, and it sounds like this. And then after yet another Phil's Genesis Party trick, we get into Domino. And this song starts out with this fluty kind of sound in the intro. And this one's actually the same sample, same shakuhachi sample that was used on Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. Only here it's cut from the start. And right here I've got the sample itself. You can see that I've cut it from the halfway point. And if I move it back to the very start, it would sound like this. Gradually getting it back to the middle point. And there you have it. So in that short sample demonstration, you might have noticed this instrument rack here. This visualizes all the different split points for all the sounds. And you can see the intro sample is here. There's the vocal thing from the emulator too. And down here is the marimba. Right now we're only playing the marimba part, right down here. And then we get to the emulator 2 vocal. And then over at the VFX, which I'll play with my left hand, I've got the similar kind of thing going with two patches divided between the keyboard. And first patch is this very dark, murky kind of pad, and the second one is this more brighter one with a quick envelope to it, like a brassy kind of envelope. And I made these both with Odin, but originally I believe these would have been the Prophet 10. So this is what the darker pad looks like on the plugin. And here's the brighter one with the envelope. And both of those are then chorused afterwards to get them a bit more presence. And they sound like this. So this is the darker pad that plays with the marimba and emulator vocals. And then a bit later on we get to the other pad sound. And then right about here, there's a pedal change which switches the Mark 80 to play the orchestral hit sound, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how Tony achieved this sound on the emulator, so I called out to a friend of mine, Genesis Central, here on YouTube, to sample it off of the 5.1 surround mixes. Big thanks to him, and I've got a link to his channel in the description. He helped me out a ton with these isolations and samples. And here is that orchestral hit isolated. And the next few pedal presses alternate between the two Mark 80 sets, one with the orchestral hit and one with the vocal part and the marimba. After a while, we get to the In Silence and Darkness part, which continues on the Wavestation, playing preset called Whisper Voices, so the same one from the previous song. And during this more quiet bit, there's a pedal change, which gets all the rest of the keyboards ready for the second half of the song. And then when we finally get to that big hit, the VFX here is playing the same percussive sample that I used on Land of Confusion, only this time with more delay. And to be completely honest, I'm not happy with this sound at all. But after hours of experimentation and pulling my own hair out, I couldn't get any better results than this. So that keeps going through the whole section. And underneath that, the Mark 80 plays a bunch of these horror film kind of samples, as Tony himself put it. There are these ghostly vocal sounds. And what these sounds are, they're basically just the Synclavier 2 preset called Voices. That's the one also heard on Mama. And modulated sine wave, or sine wave with pitch bend on it, and those were taken as separate samples and layered on top of each other, and this is what you get. Continuing forward, we get to the giant brass pad, the very cinematic sounding pad. And this horn sample I found on, I think it was some kind of emulator sample CD video. I thought it sounded quite similar, so I sampled that and then put it through a bunch of filters and EQs to get it to sound like it is. And a quick look into a bit of a trick I did behind the scenes of filming this, because Tony didn't really count when he played these sounds. He didn't play them at any specific beat or any point of the song, and they're different on each concert. So to prevent my samples and Tony's samples clashing with each other and sounding like a complete mess, I had a click in the background for when I had to trigger each of the sounds. And next up, the part that I kind of messed up in the video. This song is very overwhelming, so I guess I just lost focus here a little bit, and I ended up playing a lot of wrong notes and wrong chords here. But we're back on the Wavestation, Whisper Voices, and up on top, the Novation is playing this Synclavier 2 preset, I think it is a factory preset of the Synclavier 2. I just can't for the life of me remember the name of the preset, but it sounds like this. And then right underneath that we have the Wavestation. After this bit, we get to the Now You Never Did See Such a Terrible Thing part. And that's also a really quick switch to this very mellow, brassy sample on the VFX. And during that switch for the brassy sound on the VFX, the Wavestation also switches preset to organ 2 again. And up on the Rhodes, this is that same big orchestral brass sound. It sounds a little different when it's not played in chords, but it's the same one. And for the next part, after the descending horn line, the VFX, this time it switches to the Korg Wavestation Whisper Voices preset. I guess Tony didn't want another extra pedal press after this part, so he opted to play this sound on the VFX instead. And after that, we get right back on the Rhodes and the Wavestation with the organ and the horn sound. There is one more sound during this song. And this sound would have probably originally been from the JD800 that Tony plays it on. But I, once again, used Odin 2. There are 2 layers. This is the first one. This is a little quieter than the second one, which looks like this. And that is finally run through a chorus to get this very, very wide and brassy sound. And after that run, the orchestral hits finish off the song with the Wavestation organ 2 underneath. After Domino, the mood does a complete 180 and we get into I Can't Dance. And this one is just one simple pedal press. All it does is it switches the Novation to play the JD800 International drum kit, as it was called on the unit. And this was an expansion card, I believe. And then after the drum intro, Tony switches all of these patterns to play on a sequencer instead, so that he can allocate both of his hands to play the Rhodes, which is a custom preset I made. It's based on the classic variation, which I edited to match the original to the best of my abilities, and it sounds like this. And for this song, I also had to use a click track because live, Tony would have been following Chester and seeing what he's doing with the song. So during these hits, I obviously cannot see Chester, and I need some kind of a way to tell where the hit is coming. So I had to use a click track here. Next up, Tonight, Tonight, Tonight also uses just one pedal press. It sets the Mark 80 to play a combination of an Akai S612 marimba sample and the octave strings preset from the Wavestation. On this song, I use the sustain pedal to, well, sustain that pad underneath while the marimba re-triggers on top of it. So the whole thing on its own sounds like this. Just the marimba. And because the marimba is such a short snippet of sound, it doesn't really get affected by the sustain pedal, which the pad underneath does. And from Tonight, 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 we get straight into Invisible Touch. And this song starts out on the Mark 80 with this very digital sounding synth pad. And this sound uses 4 layers of individual synth sounds, which gives me a reason to believe it might have been from the JD800 originally. And I'm opening up all the different sounds here. So the first patch up here, top left, sounds like this. Moving on to top right. Bottom left. And then lastly, a percussive sample. This is from the Wavestation. I can't remember the exact name of this patch. I'll probably edit it in as text on the video, so you can see it on the screen now, probably. And in the bridge here, the VFX is playing the kind of chaotic, synthetic, I don't know if you could call it a drum loop, but there is this kind of loop here. And this one I found as a part of a video that was going through, I believe, the original floppy disks that Tony used. And they had loaded it up into an emulator and they were demoing the sounds that were on that floppy disk. And this was on there. The only thing that I did to this sample is that I put it through a bit of EQ and put it through a chorus, which Tony also did live. And in the next part, the Wavestation plays this lead part. So the Mark 80 keeps going on the right hand, and the left hand switches to play the Wavestation lead. And this is the same warm strings preset as heard on Fading Lights, for example. And then in the middle, there's this break where Phil plays with the audience, does some ad-libs, and here I switch the Mark 80 sound to be this very digital sounding, like DX7. I don't really know what to call it. It's kind of like an electric piano, but kind of not. Well, let's listen to it. So what this is a layer of DX7 preset. Here I've got it on Dext. I can't exactly remember what the name of the bank was that I got this sound from. It's called Piano 2 here, but I can't open the specific bank that I got this from. It's only loaded up with this one preset here. But if you want this specific sound, this is what it looks like on Dext. And this is just the DX7 sound isolated. And the second part of the sound is this percussive attack. And to me, this sounds like this is from the Wavestation as well. I'm not sure, but this sounds very reminiscent of the Wavestation. And then the build up back to the last kind of half a chorus in the outro. I've got another instance of the first sound on Invisible Touch, and I just use an expression pedal to fade it in while I play these this passage. And then there's a quick pedal press to mute the DX7 sound. And that about wraps it up for Invisible Touch. And finally, the last song on the set list, the encore, Turn It On Again. And this song consists of basically just the Mark 80 set on the same piano sound that has been used a lot earlier on in the set. It's run through the Mark 80's own chorus and then also another outboard chorus later on. And then during this song, there's one additional sound. It's this synth part in the middle that I use the expression pedal to fade in and out from underneath the piano. And with that, we've gone to the end of the Way We Walk DVD set list. Now, there are 2 additional songs that I've done in addition to this, and I'll show you those as well. So this right here, this is the Ableton session for my cover of Mama, also from 1992. This song they performed in the very early part of the tour. The song starts off with the Synclavier preset called The Voices, and that's played on the Mark 80, as seen on the video. That then fades out, and in comes the arpeggiator. I had the bass sound on Odin, and this is what that looks like on there, but this one will basically not matter at all because it gets changed so much by the arpeggiator. I've got an EQ here, and I've got 2 LFOs running. One is just turning it on and off, and the other one is sweeping a filter here, which gives it a bit more envelope and it sounds less static. Oh yes, and after that it then runs through a reverb and then once more into amplitude, where it gets put through a phase 100. This would have probably originally been the JD800, and that one had a built-in phaser, but I felt like I got the best result for a recreation of that with the phase 100, so I used that. Next sound is that emulator Kodo sound. This one was also isolated from the 5.1 mixes for me by Genesis Central. Again, huge thanks. He helped me with isolations of the other songs as well so that I could figure out the parts better and maybe try and hear Tony in a bit more of an isolated environment. But anyway, this sample here, this is what it sounds like. And then here in the bridge, there's this massive Prophet kind of pad. This would have been the Prophet 10 originally. So what I did was I used 2 instances of Repro 5. And this is what both of them look like on the actual plugin. I'll see if I can try and fit them both on screen so that you can see all the important parts. So if you want, you can copy that off of there. That's also run through a chorus, and I boosted the highs a little bit. And you might have also noticed here, I've used an instrument rack with the same kind of division between the sounds. So you can see normal and portamento. So the lower parts have portamento on them. And then in the very outro, the last pedal changes the Novation to play the same sound as in the bridge. And for Living Forever, I think I've explained the sounds pretty well already in my cover video, as well as I can explain them through a video and not having to film, going through the Wavestation's endless menus. I will most likely be adding system exclusive of my Wavestation RAM banks into the description of this video. So anyone who might have a Wavestation or the Wavestation plugin can download that and play around with these sounds for themselves. I'll have to see if I'll do that for the other keyboards as well, possibly the VFX as well. But we'll have to see once this video is out. And with that, we've gotten to the end of the demonstrations here. I will most likely be making a cover of Throwing It All Away. They performed that on this tour as well. And that's the last song off of the actual concert set lists that I would be missing. They did also rehearse The Way of the World, but the recording is such low quality that you can't really make out what is happening where properly, and I think I might have to ditch that one. Anyway, if you have any kind of comments or questions about this video or about my rig or anything related to this channel, I'll be more than happy to answer them in the comments. It's always really fun going through the comments and answering all the questions about the gear. Thank you for watching the video. I salute you if you made it all the way through this. I assume this is going to be very rambly once I actually get it down and edited. But yeah, I don't have anything more to say about this. Thank you very much. I'll probably be getting back into making covers soon. See ya.